characterization, and he will be talking about the influence of microstructure in sheet metal forming process, and that's all about him. And he has done his PhD from IIT Bombay. And sir, we have 1 hour 30 minutes for the session, and
Okay.
1 hour 15 minutes is for the presentation, and 15 minutes we will have discussion at the end. So you have to give
Okay,
at
fine.
least 15 minutes for discussion.
Okay.
Okay,
So,
thank you, sir.
so I will start then. Okay.
Sure, sir.
Okay. So a very good morning to everyone. First of all, I would like to thank Dr. TVK Gupta for giving me the opportunity to interact with you all. As he has already told that I will be talking about sheet metal forming. Now, my research area is also sheet metal forming area, but more towards microstructure. In mechanical engineering, we typically talk about stresses, strains, and forming thing. But in I'm from metallurgical and material engineering, so I'm trying to correlate this microstructure with the sheet metal forming. So, what are the parameters that typically affect your sheet metal forming behavior? Like microstructural parameters. So I will be talking about influence of microstructure in sheet metal forming. Okay, and if you have any questions, I think you should note it down, and at the end, during the discussion, you can ask me the questions. Okay, so I will be talking about influence of microstructure in sheet metal forming. And this is a brief outline of the presentation which I will be giving. Like I will be first giving you a brief introduction to the forming processes. We will be talking about deep drawing and stretching. These are the two processes we will be talking about. So there are a lot of other processes like you have bending, then you have explosive forming, you have hydroforming. So there are many type of forming processes, but we will be restricting ourselves to deep drawing and stretching, okay, because that is typically affected by your microstructure. In general, all the forming processes are affected by the microstructure. So I will be giving a brief introduction to forming processes. Then I will be talking about microstructure. So when I say what is microstructure, so what you should understand by the microstructure, okay. Now, depending upon the material, you can have different phases, different types. So we'll talk about how to define a microstructure. Then we will talk about one more parameter, that is crystallographic texture, its importance and representation. Now, many times we skip this particular thing. Like, for example, we talk about microstructure, but we skip this particular crystallographic texture aspect. Now, this is very much linked to your microstructure. And this is very, very important as far as forming behavior of your sheet metal is concerned. We'll very briefly see what it is and how do we represent. We will not go into much details. Then we will be talking about some methods to quantify this particular texture. And then we will be having one or two case studies on low carbon steel and aluminum as the time permits. Okay, now to start with, in introduction, all metals which are not in cast form are reduced to some standard shape for subsequent processing. Okay, so whatever metals which are not in the cast form, they are reduced to some standard shape for subsequent processing. Steel manufacturing companies supply metals in the form of ingots, slabs, blooms, and billets. Okay. Now these are then processed through different routes. Like, so you have a whole lot of processing sequence. You are starting from the melt pool. You are casting an ingot, okay, or a slab, or a bloom, or a billet, depending upon what is the final shape which you would like to achieve. So you will be having an ingot, slab, bloom. So all these things are different. Their metallurgy is completely different. Their control is completely different. Okay. So you are having the initial material, which is in the form of a molten metal. Then you will be casting it in the form of an ingot or a slab or a bloom or a billet. Then these are then processed through various operations. Like you can have hot rolling, you can have forging, you can have extrusion. Okay, and then the final product, depending upon what you want, you can have either plates, you can have sheets, you can have rods, wire rods, tubes, structural sections, etc. So depending upon what exactly is your final product, you will be selecting either the ingot or the slab, bloom, or billet. Now typically, whenever we want the final product to be plates or sheets, we will be selecting slabs. Okay. Now, if you go to the slabs, now the slabs are typically 500 to 1800 mm wide and 50 to 300 mm thick. So you have different type of continuous, your slabs are coming out of continuous caster. So these are usually continuously cast. Okay, so you can have strip casting, you can have thin slab casting, you can have continuous casting. So depending upon that, you will have this variation in the size. So typically a slab is very wide, 500 to 1800 mm wide, and it is 50 to 300 mm thick. And if you take the bloom is square in section. Okay, so you have ranging from 150 to 400 square mm. So slab is the biggest part, then followed by the bloom, and then you have billets. Okay, apart from this, if you are having a small manufacturing unit, you may not have the continuous caster or a thin slab caster, so you will be casting it in the form of an ingot. Okay, and then you have billet, which is much smaller, so 40 to 150 square mm. So depending upon your final shape, you will be selecting one of this, and then you will be processing it through hot rolling, forging, extrusion to produce the final shapes. Okay, so one typical sequence of operation is given here. Okay, so this is it will vary from industry to industry. Okay, but this is just a schematic to represent what sort of operations typically take place. So you will see that here you have a slab. Okay, this slab is very big, and it is highly inhomogeneous. Okay, inhomogeneous in terms of microstructure. It is inhomogeneous in terms of chemical composition. Okay, then you can have porosities, you can have defects. Okay, so this is a cast structure. So it typically has a cast structure which needs to be broken down. Whether it is a slab or a billet or a bloom, all of this are having a cast structure because it is very big in size. As I already told you in the last slide, that you can have 150 mm square or 40 mm square. So these are all cast structures and highly inhomogeneous in nature. In terms of all these parameters, they are inhomogeneous. So you will be having intermediate sequences like homogenization. Then you can have rough rolling, you can have, so all the sequences will be there, and then they will be subjected to, you will get a sequence of hot rolling. So in between you will have a rough rolling, then you have hot rolling. So hot rolling typically, after hot rolling, you get a sheet which is having 5 mm, which is 5 mm in thickness. Now then this is in subsequently cold rolled, and then it is annealed. So you have a whole lot of sequence. Now why this particular sequence I am telling you? Because this sequence is very, very important as far as microstructure is concerned. Okay. Now it is not that, suppose I want a sheet which is let's say 0.2 mm thick. Okay, and let us say it is of low carbon. Okay, low carbon steel, it is having a very less percentage of carbon, it is niobium stabilized. So you will be starting with a slab, you will be homogenizing it, you will be rough rolling it, you will be hot rolling it, you will be then once again, depending upon whether you want to homogenize it or not, anneal it or not, then you will be having a sequence of cold rolling, then you will be having annealing, and finally you are getting this 0.2 mm thick sheet, which you will be subjected to the forming operation. Now, in all this entire sequence, your microstructure is continuously changing. Okay, so for a forming behavior, you should have a desired type of microstructure. If your microstructure is not proper, during the forming operation, your material will fail. And this microstructure of the final sheet, whatever microstructure we are talking about of the final sheet, it depends upon all the processes. Okay, and hence, in order to achieve the desired properties, you have to have a control of microstructure through all these stages. Okay, even if one stage is missed, then you will not have a proper microstructure and your sheet can fail. So this is for the sheet metals. Okay, now in a similar fashion, you can have billets or blooms. So your final product could be, you can say wire rods, bars, okay, or you can have structural sections like H section, T section, or other sections. So you will be either selecting a billet or a bloom, and then you will be processing it through shaped rolls. So here you can see that here you have flat rolls. Here you have shaped rolls. Okay, and then you will be getting the final desired product. Once again, here also controlling the microstructure is important because it is also being subjected to hot rolling. So all whatever shape rolling is taking place, that is taking place at high temperature. Okay, and hence your microstructure is very, very important, even though we tend to neglect it. And I think typically we always talk about only few parameters. Grain size, then maybe if it is a carbon steel perlite fraction, okay, then we will talk about inclusions. Okay, so these are some of the parameters which we usually talk about, and we neglect all other parameters. Okay, like texture. This we usually neglect. So I will be talking about this. Okay, so this is what is the sequence of operation which you will be going through in a typical industry. Right now, if you tend to classify this metalworking processes, they fall into different categories. So this classification is just a classification according to my personal liking. So you can have n number of classifications like this. So typically, the primary metalworking processes are classified as either rolling. So in rolling, you can have shape rolling or sheet rolling, as I explained in the last slide. Then you can have drawing. So you can have wire drawing or you can have cup drawing. Okay. So you, after getting this particular product, once again you are going to subject it to a further operation. Okay. So that is what I was talking about. You can have this sheet metal subjected to deep drawing or this thick wire. So these are usually thick. Okay. Subjected to wire drawing. Okay. Or you can have extrusion, forging. So your whatever final this bloom is there, you can homogenize it. You can you can say you can cut it and then you can subject it to forging or extrusion. So this whatever wire rod is there, that can also be subjected to extrusion. You can have forming. So you can have sheet metal forming. So again, sheet metal forming can be classified into n number of types. You can have deep drawing. You can have rubber pad forming. You can have explosive forming. Nowadays, you can have hydro forming, pulse, magnetic forming, superplastic forming, and likewise. And then you also have bending. So what we will be talking about is these two processes. Deep drawing. Deep drawing means typically cup drawing. So you will have a cup made from a sheet. So this cup could be circular or it could be rectangular. If your blank is rectangular, then you can have a rectangular cup. Okay. And then stretching. So stretching, every sheet is going to be subjected to some amount of stretching. So these are the two things which we will be talking about: deep drawing and stretching. So this is another classification. Now forming can be under tensile stress, forming can be under compressive stress, or forming can be under bending and shearing stresses, or tensile and compressive stresses. So here you can see that predominantly, if you are applying tensile stresses, you can have stretch forming, you can have stretching, you can have expanding. So typically you will take a sheet and you will have a hole and then you will try to expand this particular hole. This is called as a hole expansion test. Typical for your automobile industry. Okay, so it will be basically subjected to tensile stress. So tensile stress is acting on all the direction. Stretching, once again, you will take a sheet metal and then you will try to stretch it. So once again, tensile stresses. So forming under tensile stresses, you will have stretch forming, you can have stretching, you can have expanding like hole expansion, or you can have forming by compressive stresses like forging. Forging is basically under compressive stress. Open die forging, closed die forging, rolling is also under compressive stress. Extrusion is also under compressive stress. Predominantly, it is compressive stress. Or you can have a combination of bending and shearing stresses acting on your material. So you can have bending, you can have shearing, you can have punching, you can have blanking, and you can have tensile as well as compressive stresses acting on it. So you will have deep drawing and you will have stretching. So these are the two things which we will be talking about. So this is another classification based on how the stresses are acting on your material, sheet metal, okay, or the bulk metal. Okay, now coming to deep drawing. So what is deep drawing? Now this is a schematic representing the deep drawing process. Now here you can see that you are going to have a blank. Okay, see, as I said that this particular sheet is going to be some 0.2 mm to 2 to 3 mm thick. Okay, depending upon the material. So if you are working with low carbon steel, it is typically less than 1 mm. If you are working with aluminium, it is typically less than 3 mm. Okay. So you will have a range of thicknesses. Okay. And this is typically coming from your, you can say, casting, hot rolling, okay, then cold rolling and annealing. So this is the final sheet which is cold rolled and annealed. Okay, sometimes you must have heard about the words CRCA, cold rolled, closed, annealed. Okay, so this sheet is the final sheet which is coming from all those operations, and this is what you are going to subject it to deep drying. So this is final shaping operation. So this is what is my final shaping operation. Okay, so you will be taking a blank. Okay, depending upon how you want to form your part, you are going to have the shape of the blank cut. So this blank you will be putting it here. Okay, and then you will be having a force applied onto this blank. Now this is called as a blank holding force. So here it is shown. So here you can see that this is your sheet with a particular thickness. So this is your blank holder, this is your punch, and this is your die. Okay, so the entire shaping operation is going to be taking place here. So this particular deep drawing is for drawing a cup out of a blank. So this cup could be circular or it could be a square cup depending upon your requirement. So this blank holder is going to put a force onto this material. Now this force should not be very high or it should not be very low. This force should be just sufficient such that this metal slips from this particular thing whenever this punch comes down. So here it is shown, this punch is coming down. So whenever this punch comes down, this particular sheet metal should flow inside this particular die and it should take the shape of this particular die under the action of the punch. Okay, now this is what we are calling it as a deep drawing. Now why deep drawing? So for example, if you want, all of you must have seen basically, I think, cans. Okay, so this typical cans. So this is the height of the can. Okay, now this blank is going to have a particular diameter. So you are going to have the diameter of the blank and you are going to have the diameter of the, you can say, cup, whatever you want to draw. Okay, now this d by a small d is known as the drawing ratio. Now what exactly you want? Whenever you are putting the blank in your machine, the blank should not fracture, it should not rupture, it should get shaped into its particular, basically, shape, whatever die you are having. It should not fracture. So then only my operation is going to be complete. If it fractures, suppose during the drawing operation it encounters a crack, that means my operation has failed. Now, in order to have this drawing property, you have to tailor the microstructure. There is something which is called as an optimum microstructure and texture for a deep drawing. Okay. Now, this will vary from material to material. Now, there is, means like, for example, if you are working with low carbon steel, this particular requirement of microstructure and texture will be different. If you are working with aluminium, this particular requirement of microstructure and texture is going to be different. In a similar fashion, for other processes, this will be different. Now, what you want this particular material to be drawn into the desired shape without any cracks, without any marks on it. Okay, that you can only achieve if you tailor this particular property. And that is why the entire sequence of operation is very important in your material processing. The property of my final sheet is dependent upon all the processes which I am carrying out. So this is what is your deep drawing. Okay. So extensively used to make cylindrical shaped parts such as cups, shells from sheet metals. As the blank is drawn into the die cavity, compressive stresses are set up around the flange and it tends to wrinkle or buckle. Now, these are some of the defects which can occur during deep drawing. So this first particular defect occurs if your blank holding pressure is very large. Not large, blank holding pressure is very low. Okay, so you will get typical wrinkles. Okay, now if it is very large, you will get this. If your material property is not proper, you will get this particular crack. If your material texture is not proper, you will get this. Okay, so here n, if n is not proper, you will get this. If this too, blank holder pressure is not proper, you will get this. So depending upon different type of parameters, you will have different type of you can say defects. Okay, and you can also have surface scratches. So this is typically because of the dies or punches. Now what you need to do is that you don't want all these defects. What you want, your final cup should be drawn in a proper manner. It should have a very good finish. And what is the problem with this? The problem with this is that you have to cut this particular part. If you want to get a perfect cup, you have to cut this particular part and then you will have to recycle it. Once you recycle it, it will encounter cost, particularly if it is aluminium. You must have seen that all the cans are usually made up of aluminium. So whatever Coca-Cola cans or other cans are there, they are typically made up of, you can say, aluminium. And you must have seen that there are small cans, there are big cans, and there are very big cans. Okay, so you can say 500 ml or 750 ml or 1 liter. Okay. Now you can see that this particular deep drawing is very, very good. And usually if they are made up of aluminium, this wall thickness is something around 0.3 mm. So you have to control the properties very, very precisely in order to get this particular can. Okay. And that too without earring. If earring is there, that means it will result in material wastage. You'll have to cut this and then you will have to recycle it. So that will result in, once again, increasing the cost of your processing. Okay, so now deformation of workpiece during punch travel. Wrinkling and buckling is avoided by applying proper blank holder force. The blank holding force increases friction and hence the required punch load. It should be just enough to avoid wrinkling. Edges of the punch and dies rounded off with sufficient clearance for smooth flow of the material. Insufficient or excessive clearance can result in shearing and tearing of the sheet metal. So all these parameters you can control. But earring you cannot control by just controlling the punch properties or the die properties. Earring is dependent upon your material property. Okay, and hence you have to control the process to achieve the desired microstructure and texture in order to process it properly, in order to avoid the earring. So this is just one example. So here you can see. So this is a sequence. So it is moving like this. So you can see that this ears are very, very less in this. In all these things, it is being drawn, but the ears are very less. Okay, if the ears are less, that means cutting is not required and you are saving time, you are saving money. Now limiting draw ratio, D maximum. So basically diameter of the blank divided by the diameter of the cup which you are drawing for drawing and redrawing operation, and you will be having this particular cans. So this is what is your deep drawing. Okay. Now coming to stretching or stretch forming. Now in deep drawing, what we are doing, we are keeping the blank holder pressure just enough such that the material slides down the die. Okay. It deforms and it goes into the die. In stretching, what typically we are doing? In stretching, we are fixing this particular material. So this is basically your sheet. Here you can see. This is your sheet. Now this sheet is fixed between these two, and this tool will move and it will cause deformation in the material. And when this deformation takes place, okay, your material stretches. When your material stretches, it should not basically fail, it should not rupture. And that is what is your stretch forming, that is what is your stretching. So typically one operation is shown here. So this your blank is basically fixed at these two particular ends. You are having a shape of the die, you are having a shape of the punch, you are just pressing it. And your material is basically being formed into a panel here. Now this is typically used in automobile industry. Okay, so this is basically your stretching. Now both of these things depend upon your material properties. Okay, so deep drawing as well as stretching, both of these things, they depend upon the material property. So again, so this is what stretching. Okay. So now you will find that in most of the cases, your material undergoes both the combination, like it is drawn to some extent and it is stretched to some extent. Okay. And here you will see that this is known as body in white. This is your vehicle body in white. Here you can see that this part is formed, this part is stretched, this part is stretched, and at some so this particular part. Now in earlier days, what used to happen? My material properties I was unable to tailor, and hence I used to make basically this components separately, and then I used to weld it. Okay, welding will once again create another defect. Nowadays you will see that this particular entire component from here to here, except the door, it is formed in a single stroke. Okay, it is formed in a single stroke because I am having highly deep drawing properties in my sheet metals. I can tailor the microstructure, I can tailor the texture, and I can get this particular property, and hence I can form this entire panel at once. Earlier, what people used to do, they used to form it in 2 or 3 different components, and then they used to weld it. Welding will create once again another defect. So that is what is the importance of your deep drawing. That is what is the importance of your stretching. Okay. If you can have a more stretchable material, if you can have a more deep drawable material with a very high strength, then you can have the entire operation done at once. So you will be reducing the cost of the dies, you will be reducing the cost of the toolings, their maintenance, and you can have an increase in the production time. Okay. So that is how your this sheet metal forming works. It helps in automation of the manufacture of the parts. Okay, so that is why you will see that in olden days people used to use this ambassador cars. So if you see those cars, those were the panels were not formed in one go. So you will see that a lot of welds are there, and then the panel was very thick. Nowadays the panel is thin, it is drawn in one single sheet metal operation. Okay, and that is why it is cheaper. Right now, both as I said that your forming operation is very, very important. Whatever forming operation is there, that is very, very important. So deep drawing is there and stretching is there. So both deep drawing and stretching is there. Now, what are the properties, what are the material properties on which this depend? Deep drawing depends on what, and your stretching depends upon what? So there is a term which is called as formability. Okay, the ability of the metal to be formed into specific shape without developing any failures. So without developing any failures means there are different type of failures: fracturing, wrinkling, earring, shape distortion, loose metal, scratches on your surface, etc. So the ability of the metal to be formed into specific shape without developing any failure is termed as formability. If your material is highly formable, then you can have complex stampings, typically in automobile and aerospace components. It is very essential to what? Everybody can hear me? Hello? There was one question. They are saying that this voice is not audible. So everyone can hear me? Okay. Okay, so basically, if you are having a highly formable material, then you can have basically a complex stamping in one go. And hence it is very essential to understand the forming behavior of the different type of materials. Now, for understanding the forming behavior of the material, you need to quantify it. So you have to have measures of formability. Okay, so what are the measures of formability? How do you measure the forming behavior? How do you quantify the forming behavior? And what is its relation with deep drawability and stretch forming? Okay, now formability depends on the skill of both the producer and the fabricator. So fabricator is basically the person who is doing the final operation. Producer is the one who is making the final sheet. Now, material properties that affect formability. So you have something called as a strain hardening exponent, N. You have something which is called as a normal anisotropy. We will see all these things in subsequent slides. So you have strain hardening exponent N, you have normal anisotropy R, you have grain size, you have strength, and you have thickness of the sheet. So these are the material properties which you will have to look into. So this is the material properties. Now you also have the parameters, process parameters that can affect your formability. You can have blank holding force, lubrication, temperature, die and punch design. So these are the process parameters. So material properties, we will focus on material properties. Now, as I said that strain hardening exponent N. Now it is said that if you are having a higher N, you are having better stretching. Okay, your stretch formability, stretching capability of the material is going to be high whenever you are going to have a higher strain hardening exponent. Now, how do you quantify this particular strain hardening coefficient? You quantify this particular strain hardening coefficient by the tensile test. Okay, uniaxial tensile test will give you an indication of the strain hardening exponent of the material. Now, the second one is the normal anisotropy. This decides the deep drawability. Okay, so this particular normal anisotropy decides the deep drawability of your sheet metal. Now you can measure this once again by a tensile test, but a modified version. Okay, so we will discuss that. Then you have grain size. If the grain size of my material is higher, like I have a larger grain, formability will be better, but on the other hand, strength will be lower. So grain size and strength are related to each other, and thickness of the sheet metal. Okay. So those are the parameters which will affect basically your formability. Now, okay, so this is a log plot of true stress versus true strain, and you fit a linear curve. So the slope will give you the strain hardening exponent N. So there is a ASTM standard for that. So you can quantify N. Okay, so N can have a value of 0.3 to 0.5 depending upon the type of material. So higher the N, higher will be your stretchability, or you can say approximately a higher deep drawability. Okay. Then you have the normal anisotropy. Okay. So once again, you are going to have an ASTM standard for that. So in this, we are using a rectangular sample and we are putting 4 marks on this particular thing. Okay. This is, I think, 20 by 20. Yes. 20 by 20, and then you will be stretching it to approximately 20%. So you are stretching it 20%, and after that R will be given by strain in the width direction divided by strain in the thickness direction. So that is going to give me R. Okay. So that is basically your, you can say normal anisotropy, not normal anisotropy, you can just say R values. Okay. Now, if you are having a sheet metal, so this is your rolling direction, this is your transverse direction, and this is your normal direction. So you can measure R in 0 direction, that is along the rolling direction. You can measure R in the transverse direction. So you will have to cut a sample from here, you will have to cut a sample from here, and you will have to cut a sample from here. So R0, R45, and R90, and all three together, there is a formula which will give you R bar, which is termed as normal anisotropy. If you are having a higher R value, that means your material is more formable. So you will see that all low carbon steels are having a very good R value. So there are typical grades like interstitial free steels, then you can have interstitial free high strength steels. So extra deep drawing steels, drawing quality steels. So all these steels, they are having a very good R bar. That means the normal anisotropy is high, and hence they are much more formable as compared to other sheets. And you can measure this by using this particular type of sample. So R bar. And I think all of you know how to measure the grain size. You take the microstructure and you use a linear intercept method, and you can measure the grain size. And what was the other parameter? Strength. Okay, strength once again you can measure by the tensile test. right? Okay, so you can just have a look at this. So you will have a sample in the rolling direction, you will have a sample in the transverse direction, and you will have a sample in the 45 direction, and you will be using this for particular formula to give you R bar, and you will be using this particular formula to give anisotropy, planar anisotropy. What is the anisotropy in this particular plane? So whatever plane is there. So what is the planar anisotropy? Now planar anisotropy should be near zero, and this should be as high as possible. In order to have a very good formability. So if your formability is high, your deep drawability is going to be high, and your stretching capacity of your material is also going to be high. So some of the values are given for different materials. So you can see that cold rolled aluminum killed steels, they are having, so these are typically your low carbon steels, different grade of low carbon steels. Apart from this, you also have what is called as interstitial free steels, which are having R bar value typically 2.4. Okay, so you can see that if I am having a zinc alloy, it is 0.4 to 0.6. That means my sheet will fracture before deformation very early. Hot rolled steel, you have typically 0.8 to 1. Cold rolled rimmed steels, 1 to 1.4. Cold rolled aluminum killed steel, 1.4 to 1.8. And you can see that aluminum alloys 0.6 to 0.8, copper and brass, and titanium alloys 3 to 5. So once again, these are highly formable steels, formable alloys. And HSLA. So depending upon different type of material, you will have different quantification of this. In general, higher the formability, better will be the forming capacity of your material. It can be deep drawn, it can be stretched. And that is why you will see that in automobiles, the outer body panels are always made up of interstitial free grade of steel. They are having a forming capacity, formability of around 2.4, 2.5. Particular formulas. Planar anisotropy, delta R should be near zero. Okay, so that is what is the formability. Now, what is the effect of this particular formability on deep drawing? So here, once again, relationship between grain size and normal anisotropy is given. So here you can see this interstitial free steels. Okay, so you can see that this R bar can vary depending upon the grain size. So if your higher ASTM size number means smaller grain size. Higher the grain size, improvement in the average normal anisotropy. So you can see that as the grain size is increasing, so in a particular material, this is a rimmed low carbon steel, this is aluminum killed steel, and this is an interstitial free steel. So you also have an effect of grain size on the forming behavior. So finer the grains, so you will have a formability of maybe 1.6, 1.7. As you go on increasing the grain size, you can have 2.2, 2.6, 2.8, and you can try to approach 3. But once again, your sheet will go on becoming weaker and weaker. Okay, and dent resistance will decrease. Right? So if you compare different type of cars, for example, if you take Maruti, if you take Hyundai, or if you take Mercedes, so this particular properties, formability, the shapes, they vary because they all are using different grades of steel, different grades of materials. And accordingly cost, of course. And once again, this average strain ratio and the limiting draw ratio. So you can, I have already told you that if you take a blank diameter and the cup diameter, so the ratio will give you the limiting draw ratio. So you can see that for zinc, the limiting draw ratio is very small. For steel, it is higher. For titanium, it is much higher. So again, they are having a relationship. So these two are having a relationship. Now, if your formability or your microstructure is not optimized, what you will get is typically in a typical deep drawing operation, you will get this ear. So if ears are there, that means material wastage, that means higher cost. Okay. Okay, so that is one way. So you can have, you can say you can have N, you can have R values, okay? You can have normal anisotropy, you can have planar anisotropy. Now, apart from this, so suppose you want your material undergoes a lot of different type of operations. So you can construct a what is called as a forming limit diagram. So this is your fail zone and this is your safe zone. So you can see that different materials are having different forming behaviors. So brass, high strength steel, aluminium, low carbon steel. So they are all having a basically different type of behavior. So this is your low carbon steel having a higher formability, high strength. Now these are different strain paths. So in forming limit curves, you are having right from uniaxial strain path to plane strain to biaxial. See, during a forming operation, your material can undergo not just the uniaxial strain path, it can undergo biaxial strain path, it can undergo plane strain. So basically, here in this particular forming limit diagram, you have various strain paths. You can have pure shear, you can have simple tension, you can have plane strain. Okay, so on this side, you are going to have something like biaxial, then plane strain. Okay, and then accordingly you are going to have basically the fail zone or the you can say safe zone, and you can construct the entire diagram to see what is actually happening during the forming operation, and then you can use your material or not for that particular application. So you can simulate that. Okay. Now, in order to determine the forming limit diagram, you will have to take different sheets. So this will correspond to uniaxial, and this will correspond to equibiaxial. So you have different strain paths. You are testing your material and then you are measuring strains in this particular region, and then you are constructing basically the forming limit diagram, which will tell you basically whether your material is going to fail or it is going to pass the analysis. Okay, and it will give you the idea of the strains which are occurring in your material. So here once again the same example is given. So you have uniaxial compression, you have pure shear, you have uniaxial tension, you have plane strain, you have biaxial tension, you have equibiaxial tension. Okay, so all the strain paths are being considered, and then you will plot the points. Okay, failed and safe strains. So and then you will be correlating them, and you will be drawing a FLD, forming limit curve, or a forming limit diagram, and then based on that you will predict what type of strains can occur in your material and whether it is suitable for that particular application or not. Okay, so this particular, see, if it is you will be marking the circular grids. Circular can become ellipse, or it can just increase in size. If it increases in size, it is equibiaxial. If it is increased in one direction, it will be tensile. If it is decreased, if the circle is decreased like this, it is compression. So you can have all the strains where they are occurring in your material, and in the failure zone what is happening. So you can see, and then you can construct the forming limit diagram. Right? So that is basically your forming limit diagram. So you can have R bar, you can have N, you can have grain size, you can have FLD. So all these things, what they are telling whether my material will work in that particular application or not. Now, what is the relationship between texture and deep dryability? I have spoken about one term which is called as texture. So in this N, okay, then R bar, grain size, okay, and what else was there? We have talked about microstructure. Now, in the microstructure, there is one more term which is called as texture, so which we'll discuss in subsequent 1 or 2 slides. Okay, so this we tend to skip, but this is very, very important. So even if your microstructure is optimized, even if your grain size and other things are optimized, okay, still if your texture is not optimized, you will get this behavior. And actually what you want is this behavior. Okay. So texture can have 2 types of effects on deep dryability: uneven flow due to variation in plastic properties in different direction, peaks and troughs around the periphery of the drawn curve, that is earring. To obtain extensive deformation in drying operation, metal flow in the flange region should occur easily without buildup of high stress. So suitable texture can introduce a differential strengthening between the in plane and the through thickness modes of plastic deformation. Now, what does it mean? It means that if suppose you are having a sheet metal, okay, you want your material to flow very easily in this direction, but it should have very good strength in this particular direction. It should have very high strength in the thickness direction, and it should have very low strength in this particular direction, such that your plastic deformation is very easy in this particular direction. So whenever you are deep drawing, suppose this is the punch and this is your sheet. Whenever this particular thing is going in, okay, so this sheet will be moving in like this. So you want that your material flow should be very easy, but at the same time you want that your sheet should not rupture. It should not crack. So that is what is your normal anisotropy. Okay, so that is what is your increase in R bar. So if you are increasing the R bar, what it means? It means that it will flow very easily in this particular direction, and at the same time it is going to have very high strength in this particular direction, and it will not give me this particular behavior, it will give me this behavior. And that is coming from what is called as crystallographic texture. Okay, this particular property is coming by what is called as a crystallographic texture. Right? So once again the same thing, R, strain in the width. How do you measure R? You measure R by strain in the width direction, true strain in the width direction divided by true strain in the thickness direction. For typical 20% deformation in a uniaxial tensile test, you take 3 samples, 0 degrees to the rolling direction, 45 degrees to the rolling direction, and 90 degrees to the rolling direction, and then you determine the normal anisotropy R bar and delta R from this particular tensile test. Okay, now if your R bar is very high and delta R is 0, you will not get the earring behavior. So that is what is the optimum property which I am aiming for. Okay, right? So now we will see what we mean by microstructure. Now typically when we try to define the microstructure, we take all these things into consideration. We take the phase structure, we take the grain structure. So basically, what are the different features of my microstructure? My microstructure is consisting of different phases, different grains, composition, point defects, line defects, planar defects, volume defects. Okay, so typically, conventionally, how I define microstructure? I define my microstructure as the size and shape distribution, of my different phases, grains, and defects in my particular material. So that is how I define the microstructure. So if you take the phase, it is having a uniform composition and similar structure and properties. Phase structure can be altered through phase transformation. Now you have grain. Grains means basically they are of the same phase or crystal structure but different orientation of the crystals. Grain structure can be altered through phase transformation, plastic deformation, recrystallization, and grain growth, and this is what we are doing through processing. Okay, producer, not the fabricator. As I said that phase transformation is occurring when you are doing continuous casting. Okay, segregation is occurring when you are doing continuous casting or any type of casting process. It is prone to have segregation. So you want your material to have a homogeneous composition. You want your material to have less number of point defects, less number of line defects, planar defects. Okay, so you are going to have all these parameters of your microstructure, which you try to optimize it. Okay, now this is the job of the producer. Okay, now in addition to all these things, so once again, one more slide for the microstructure. So if you see the material, your material is typically 3-dimensional. It is not 2-dimensional. So I will be mostly talking about sheet metal, and hence I have taken an example of sheet metal. So in sheet metal, sheet metal is produced through casting, then hot rolling, and then cold rolling. So you will have a rolling direction. Okay, so this is your rolling direction, this is your transverse direction, and this is your normal direction. So your sheet is continuously reducing in thickness in this particular direction. So your ND is compressed and your RD is elongated. So your sheet is continuously elongating. So initially your slab is having a thickness of 150 mm, okay, and your final sheet thickness is typically 0.2 mm or 1 mm depending upon what is your requirement. So what you are doing, you are continuously rolling your sheet and there is no deformation along this particular direction. So your sheet is continuously elongating along RD and it is continuously getting compressed along ND. Okay, so and hence it is increased in size because volume preservation is there. So now if you look at the microstructure is three-dimensional in nature. So you are having, so each of this color represents one grain and this boundary is your grain boundary. So here you can see that these are the grain boundaries. Now please remember your grains are a 3D entity. Your grain boundaries are a 2D entity. Now this 3D entity, while observing the microstructure, what I am doing, I am cutting it. So if you cut a 3D by a plane, what you get? You get a 2D. If you cut a 2D by a plane, you get 1D. So this is what is your grain and this is what is your grain boundary. But actually if you see, this grain is 3D and this boundary is 2D. It is a surface. This is a surface and this is a volume. Okay. Now these grains can get elongated. Now if you take a single phase, so we will first consider the single phase material. Now let us consider that single phase material. So now what you have a rolling direction, you have a transverse direction and you have a normal direction, right? Now let us consider I am having a material which is steel. Now what is the crystal structure of steel? Steel is BCC in nature. So you have atoms at this location. So this is BCC. Now crystallographically, if you see, it is having A, it is having B and it is having C. Now all these grains are having A, B, C, right? Now for all the grains, this ABC is already existing. All the grains are BCC in nature, but all of this are having a different relationship with this particular thing. So if you see this ABC, it is having a different relationship with this. If you see this particular ABC, it is having a different relationship, and that is how your grains are different. Even though everything is basically iron, you are having a polycrystalline material. This is typically termed as a polycrystalline grain structure. Okay, so you are having n number of grains. Depending upon the size, you will have number of grains, and each of these grain is going to have a fixed relationship with this. So here you can see that this particular thing is green and this particular thing is green. So they are having a same relationship with this two, with this particular basis. And that is how these grains are defined. So it is a three-dimensional structure, not a two-dimensional structure. You have to keep this in mind. Okay, and sometimes you can also have twins. Now this will be typical for FCC materials like stainless steel. Okay, now there are different length scales. So you can have optical microscopy. So optical microscopy, this pearlite is not visible. You have SEM, this pearlite is visible. Then you have defect structure. This is your TM. Then this is your lattice. So this is your HRTM. Right. So depending upon what you want to control, you will have different type of characterization. So I will not go into the detail of characterization. First, I will just tell you that apart from conventional microstructure, is there anything else which we should concentrate on? So that particular thing is the orientation of the grains. Okay. That particular thing which we should concentrate whenever we want to deep draw. Whenever we want to we are having a deep drawing operation for any material, we have to concentrate on this term also. So this is typically for an HCP structure. Okay. Now this is a typical HCP structure onto which you have this particular ABC superimposed. So you will see that at some locations you are finding the same color. So these two are having the same color, that means they are of same orientation. This particular thing and this particular thing, they are of same orientation. And I think, yeah, this one and this one, they are different. So you will see that there is a boundary, there are similar orientations, there are similar type of grains, there are different type of grains, and there is a boundary, so which is what you will have to concentrate on, right? So very briefly, what I will tell is that, so you are having a crystallographic texture. So whenever you are doing any type of processing, there is a development of crystallographic texture, and there is a difference between a morphological texture and a crystallographic texture. Now, one example is given here. So here you can see that these are the inclusions. Typically, you will find MnS, sulfur is added whenever you are going to have manganese. Whenever you are going to have sulfur, you are adding manganese in a stoichiometric ratio, because MnS inclusions will be formed, they are deformable. Now, you are rolling in this particular direction, you see that all these particular things are elongated in this particular direction. So this is your morphological texture. It does not have any crystallography involved in it. Now, there are certain instances when you will find that all the grains are oriented in a similar fashion, and this is what I will call it as a textured material. Okay, and this is what I will call it as a random material. Now, basically, what is texture and what is random? If you are having a fixed relationship between RD, TD, and ND with the ABC of the material of the grain, then you are going to have a textured material. If most of the grains in your material are having a similar type of relationship with RD, TD, and ND, you are going to say that my material is textured. Okay. If they are having a different type of relationship, each of these grain is having a different type of relationship, I will say that my material is random. Right. So that is what is basically very briefly texture. Okay. Then now we will you can say briefly, we will see what are the different type of processings. I will just concentrate on this particular diagram. Now this particular diagram is for steel. Okay. Now you are having this as I told you, you are having continuous casting. Then you are having rough rolling. Then you are having hot rolling. Then you are having cold rolling, and then you are having annealing. Okay, now whenever you take a steel, okay, or a low carbon steel in general, you will have 4 regions in which you can roll. So you will have a region where you have austenite, which we will call it as a austenite recrystallization region. And then you will have a region where austenite will not recrystallize. We will call it as austenite no recrystallization region. Then we will have basically austenite ferrite region. Austenite plus ferrite. Now here you are having austenite, here you are having austenite, and then there will be a region wherein you will have only ferrite. Okay, so there are 4 regions in general in a low carbon processing step. You are having austenite recrystallization region. In this particular region, what is happening is that during deformation, your austenite is continuously recrystallizing. So there is repeated nucleation and growth of grains during deformation. So your material is being rolled, the temperature is so high that your austenite is continuously recrystallizing. So there is a repeated nucleation and growth of new grains in this particular region. We call this region as austenite recrystallization region. Then you will have a austenite no recrystallization region. Here what will happen, whatever austenite grains are there, they will be deformed and they will be forming bands inside them. We call this as austenite no recrystallization region. Then you will have austenite ferrite region, wherein austenite and ferrite coexist, so you can deform in this particular region, or at you further come down in temperature, you will have ferrite region. Okay, so you can process in all these particular regions, and accordingly your grain structure will be different. So if you process in your austenite recrystallization region and then you cool it to the room temperature, what you will get? You will get a coarse grain structure. a very coarse grain structure will be formed whenever you are deforming in the austenite recrystallization region, and then you are bringing your material to the room temperature. So you will have a coarse grain structure. Now, when you are processing in the austenite no recrystallization region, what will happen is that it will form bands. And during cooling to room temperature, you will have nucleation of ferrite at these bands as well as the grain boundaries. Initially, the nucleation was only at the grain boundaries. So you will get a finer structure. So if you are processing in the austenite recrystallization region, you will be getting a very coarse grain ferrite structure at room temperature. When you are processing in the austenite ferrite region, what you will get? You will get a banded structure of the austenite, and after cooling, you will get a finer structure of ferrite. And if you process in the austenite ferrite region, what you will get is that austenite will tend to recrystallize and ferrite will be elongated. So you will get an elongated structure with a recrystallized structure. So bimodal grain size distribution. And if you roll in the ferrite region, you will have an elongated ferrite structure. So depending upon how you roll your material, at what temperature you roll your material, you will have a different type of structure. And all this are going to affect your, basically, you can say, forming behavior. Okay. You want equiaxed uniform grain structure with a proper texture, then only your material is going to have a very high formability. Okay, now typical example. Now after cold rolling, so this is a cold roll structure. This is a partially recrystallized structure. You will see that here you are having entirely the banded structure. Now this nucleation will start from this particular deformed bands, and the orientation of this is as the orientation of the deformed band, and hence whenever you are cold rolling your material and whenever you are recrystallizing, there is a definite texture which is forming, there is a definite process of nucleation and growth which is taking place, and there is a definite type of crystallographic texture which will form. The orientation of your grains will depend upon this particular thing. Now this will not be so in this particular cases, because generally what we do, we roll in this region or we roll in this two-phase region, and then we cool it to the room temperature. When we cool it to the room temperature, this nucleation starts randomly and at the bands. So there is no specific relationship. And in general, all these processes, they tend to form a random texture. And your R bar will be low. R bar will be low. Whenever you cold roll, you get a specific type of texture. Your grains are oriented specifically, and hence you will get a high R bar by controlling this particular process. If you control your recrystallization, if you control your deformation, okay, and you control this particular mechanism, you will get a proper texture which is suitable for deep drawing. Okay, now what do you mean by texture? I have already told you this is a morphological texture. Now there are various representations of texture. Okay, so let us say this is my grain 1, this is my grain 2, this is my grain 3, this is my grain 4. So I have one representation which says HKL UVW. So HKL means the plane which is, so this is my RD, this is my TD, and this particular thing is my ND, right? So the plane containing rolling direction and transverse direction, I call it as a rolling plane. HKL, so the plane of my grain which is parallel to the rolling plane. So HKL plane parallel to the rolling plane, and UVW direction parallel to the rolling direction. So this is my rolling direction. So this is the first representation. So in this particular case, I have 100 type of plane which is parallel to the rolling plane, and 110 type of direction which is parallel to the rolling direction. So this is my rolling direction and this is my 110 direction. Okay, so HKL UVW for this particular grain. For the second grain, what I have, I still have 100 type of plane parallel to the rolling plane, but now I have 100 direction parallel to the rolling direction. So this becomes this. In this particular case, I have 110 plane parallel to the rolling plane, and I am having 100 direction parallel to the rolling direction. So it becomes this. Here I am having 111 plane parallel to the rolling plane and 110 direction parallel to the rolling direction, and hence this 4 grains can be identified based on their texture. So this still the entire material is my BCC, but still these 4 grains are different in terms of texture. Okay, so that is one representation, HKL UVW, HKL plane parallel to the sheet plane, okay, and UVW direction parallel to the rolling direction for that particular grain. So that is HKL UVW representation. Now, you will see that we are having two type of materials. We are having BCC materials and we are having FCC materials. In general, we are working with these two. So the most widely used material is this iron, and then you are having aluminium, you are having copper, and I think you are having nickel. Okay, so now after recrystallization, okay, this material tend to develop this particular texture. Okay, 100,001. So if you take 1000 grains or 10,000 grains, out of this majority will be having this particular type of texture. Okay, so basically whether that is good for my material formability or not, that I have to decide. Okay, and during deformation, so this is for recrystallization. Okay, now this particular slide is for recrystallized FCC material. So I am having an FCC metal, typically aluminium. After recrystallization, it develops a cube texture. Okay, cube on edge or cube on face, it develops both. So it develops a cube texture after recrystallization. Now when I deform this material, it develops something different. It develops this. It develops brass 110 parallel to the sheet plane, 112 parallel to the. So if I take 100,000 grains, out of that majority of them will be having this particular thing. Okay, so whether that is good or bad for me, I don't know. I have to find out. So whenever you roll any FCC material, it develops this type of texture. Whenever you recrystallize FCC material, it develops this type of texture. Okay, now whether both are good or both are bad, that I have to decide. Now in a similar fashion, if you take BCC material, after recrystallization they develop this, and after deformation they develop 100 and 110. Okay, so whether my deformed material and recrystallized material, whatever texture is there, that is good or not, that I have to decide. So typically the above mentioned components are important from the point of view of increasing the formability of the sheet metal, often represented by the average R value. The thermomechanical processing of the material should be tailored to achieve a desired mix of this particular texture component depending upon the material. Okay, so there is one question. See, workpiece material is usually much harder than your sheet metal. So then only you are able to roll, right? So if you take a low carbon steel, you are having a roller. Okay, so this roller has no influence as such in terms of material. But of course, if you take a sheet metal, what you want, the deformation, the plane strain mode of deformation will be here. But here you will have shear deformation. So you can have a gradient in texture. Gradient in texture in the deformed material. Since there is a gradient of texture in the deformed material, after recrystallization also you will have a gradient. So you will have to see that. You will have to optimize that. Now this can be reduced by what is called as a lubrication. So if you have proper lubrication and if you have a proper hot deformation, then you will have to optimize this particular through thickness gradient. So once again, this can also affect your R values. It can also affect your forming behavior. Okay, so you'll have to roller material as such will not have any influence, but the shear deformation. See, at the surface you are having a shear deformation, at the center you are having a plane strain deformation. Okay, so the shear deformation can develop different components. This is what is for plane strain. Okay. Now another notation, So you are having a sample reference frame, you are having a RD, you are having a TD, and you are having an ND. So in 3D, 3 angles are needed to coincide the sample reference frame with the crystal reference frame, and that is what is called as your Euler angles. They also define your texture. So this is, let's say, this is your A, this is your B, and this is your C of a grain. And this is your sample reference frame. Okay, 3 angles are needed to coincide your sample reference frame with the crystal reference frame. So I will give my first rotation about ND. Okay, I will give my second rotation about the changed ND. So this is basically my RD dash. Okay, so first rotation is about ND. So ND remains invariant. Okay, so this axis will become RD will become RD dash, TD will become TD dash. Then I will give second rotation about this axis. Okay, then I will give my third rotation. So basically in 3D, you require exactly 3 angles to coincide the sample reference frame with the crystal reference frame. Okay, and that is what is basically another notation of your texture. So first rotation you are giving about this particular axis. When you are giving this first rotation about this axis, this RD will be changed to RD dash, this TD will be changed to TD dash. Okay, then second rotation you are giving about this changed RD dash. So first one is your phi 1, then the second one is your phi, so your ND will change to ND dash. Okay, and then the third rotation you are giving once again about this axis phi 2. So in these 3 rotations, in this 3D, you can have the coincidence of the sample reference frame with the crystal reference frame, and hence each grain you can represent by phi 1, phi 2. So this is another representation, just like your HKL UVW. For one grain you are having HKL UVW, for that grain you can have phi 1, phi 2. So what it means that exactly 3 angles are needed to coincide the sample reference frame with the crystal reference frame in Bunge's notation. So there are other notations like Cox notation, then Rodriguez notation. So there are different type of notations, but in 3D you will be needing 3 angles to coincide the sample reference frame with the crystal reference frame, and that is what is you can define as the texture. So again, you can represent it in 3D, either in a Cartesian coordinate system or a polar coordinate system. So you will have phi 1, you will have phi, you will have phi 2. Now let us say you are having let's say 10,000 grains. Let's say you are having 10,000 grains. Now what you can do that you can have 10,000 different points, each corresponding to one particular grain. Okay, now so this entire space will be filled up. Now, if suppose you are having a cluster of grains, if you are having cluster of points about this particular thing, that means your material is textured. If they are distributed uniformly throughout, then your material is random. Right? Now you can have a 2-dimensional section out of this. So you can cut it. And you can have a 2D section of it. Okay, so this is what is my 2D section. Phi 2 equal to constant. And I am having one axis as phi 1. So this is my phi 1 and this is as phi. And this is phi 2 equal to constant. So I can have different sections of it and I can represent it in that particular form also. But if my points are uniformly distributed, if my intensities are uniformly distributed, I will say that my material is random. If they are clustered around some points, I will say my material is textured. How do you measure it? You can measure it by X-ray diffraction, or you can measure it by what is called as an electron backscatter diffraction. So I will not go into the details of the measurement because that is not required. Now here I am calling it as a bulk texture because I am getting the bulk information in the form of diffracted intensities. Okay, I am getting bulk information in the form of diffracted intensities. I am not getting local information. For example, if I am having a material, how this particular texture is varying, this information is missing in this XRD. And hence I will call it as an overall average bulk texture. On the other hand, if I go to electron backscatter diffraction, so what is an electron backscatter diffraction? I am having an electron beam I am moving to one point, I am collecting what is called as a Kikuchi pattern, and I am solving it for orientation. So at each of this point, at each of this XY coordinate, I will get phi 1, phi and phi 2. So as I have already told you, phi 1, phi 2 is nothing but your orientation. So at each and every point, I am going to get an information about the orientation, and that is what is my electron backscatter diffraction. And if you represent it, so it will have microstructure information plus texture at each point. So this phi 1, phi 2 is nothing but my texture. Okay, so that is what are the two different methods for measurement of local texture and bulk texture. Now you can do this by TM also, TM EBFD also you can do this. Now we will very quickly see the first case study, low carbon steels. Now as I told you that low carbon steels, so there are different type of low carbon steels. So there is a deep dryability parameter, so formability R bar, which is linked to your deep dryability. I will call that whenever you are having an higher R value, that means your steel is more dryable. So here you can see that I am having IF steel. Here I am having bake hardenable steel. Here I am having HSLF steel. And here I am having my dual phase and trip steel. So these are the different grades of steels which are typically used in your automobile industry. You will see that this IF steel is having the highest formability. But at the same time, it is having the lowest strength. So your dent resistance will be very low. Okay, now in order to get this particular property, you need to tailor the texture. Now, how do you tailor the texture? You have to control hot rolling, you have to control cold rolling, and you will have to control annealing. All these three parameters you need to control in order to get a high R bar value in bulk of tonnages of the material. Okay, now same is true for your electrical steels. Right, electrical steels. Now in electrical steels, if you see electrical steels, you want maximum permeability of the flux, so which will be in 100 direction. So the requirement for electrical steel is a different texture. The requirement for low carbon steel is a different texture, and you have to produce this in tons. So you have to control these hot rolling parameters. You have to control this cold rolling. You have to control this continuous annealing or batch annealing, whatever you are doing. Okay, now in general, it has been seen that if 111 plane, so if you are having a sheet, if your 111 sheet plane is parallel, if 111 plane is parallel to the sheet plane, I will call it as 111 parallel to ND. And so you can have 100 type of plane parallel to the sheet plane. You can have 111 type of plane parallel to the sheet plane, and this is my ND. Okay, so this is my RD and this is my TD. So if I am having more number of planes oriented with 111 parallel to the sheet plane, then I am going to have an increase in the formability. So this is a unwanted component, this is a wanted component, and this is controlled through annealing and deformation, that is cold roll. Right? So my R value increases with increase in 111 type of planes, and for controlling this, you have to control cold rolling, you have to control annealing, you will have to control hot rolling. And once again, why do we use IF steels? We use IF steels because as I go on reducing the carbon content, my R value goes on increasing, and I am having a somewhere optimum at this particular level. Okay, so that is why I am using IF steel. And you will have to go to the entire metallurgy. If you want to control annealing, you will have to control the precipitation. Depending upon the batch annealing, you are having a different type of precipitation. Depending upon continuous annealing, continuous annealing happens in 5 minutes. Batch annealing happens in few hours. So both of these technologies, batch annealed aluminum killed low carbon steels, also can give you a very good 111 texture. continuously annealed sheet also can give me a very good texture. So depending upon what type of process you are using and what type of steel you are using, you will have to control this particular two processes in order to get this high forming behavior, right? And another example is your aluminum sheet. Now in aluminum, the requirement is completely different. If you take aluminum, you will have to draw these cups, right? Now in aluminum, it undergoes progressive deep drawing. So I have already shown you the smaller cups, then slightly bigger, then bigger. So multiple stages it undergoes. Now in aluminum, you will have to control the hot rolling process. So as I said that in aluminum, this is a component which comes from recrystallization. These are the components which come from deformation. Okay, so you are having deformed component giving some years. Okay, and you are having recrystallized component giving some years. Now, if you want to balance, so if initially from the deformed, you will have a earring profile. Now this earring profile is because of deformation. Okay, now this earring profile is because of recrystallization. So you will have to balance both in order to get zero earring. So in aluminum, how do you control this? You have to control the hot deformation process. You have to control the hot deformation process because this hot deformation process, see, I will not take much more time. I will take another 5 minutes. So in this cube component is formed in the hot deformation process, and this cube component goes on decreasing as you go on cold rolling. So in your cold rolled material, you need to have some amount of cube for the cube to grow during recrystallization. So in case of aluminum, you will have to control the cube grains. Okay, hot rolling you have to control so that you have cube grains, and then they will form this cube recrystallization texture. Okay, so I think I will stop here for today. If you have any questions, you can ask.
Thank you, sir. There are few questions already people have posted it seems in the chat box. You are muted, sir.
Okay. I think I have already answered most of the questions during presentation, but I will answer one more. Sir, are these colors which are showing separate grains are random, or this color depicts some specific nature? See, in your material, you can have multiple colors. Okay, so this color, if you go back to this particular slides, you will see that, yeah, in this, same color represents same type of grains. So that means same 51552. Okay, so this color represents the texture. If the entire material is having one specific color, that means your material is highly textured. If they are having many colors, that means your material is random. Okay, so that is what is basically this color represents. This color represents basically your texture. So here also you can see that in this particular case, this is a triangle, right? So if you take this red color says that this particular grain is having an orientation which is closer to this. So if you're having many colors, that means it will be distributed uniformly in this triangle. If you are having only two type of colors, it will be either this or this or this, depending upon what type of texture you have, what type of processing you have. Right? Any other thing? Can you suggest some bio-friendly lubricants for metal forming? So that you'll have to talk to somebody who is working on tribology, I think.
True.
Yeah,
the same person. There is one more question.
The aim of the lubrication is basically that the lubricant should not deform. It should basically maintain the temperature uniform throughout the sheet. Okay. See, generally what happens, your center will be having a different temperature and the surface is going to have a different temperature. So this lubricant is very critical in aluminum rolling. And that is what is basically this people are not telling what type of lubricant they are using during hot rolling. What factor should be focused more if we need repetitive results with cold rolling? See, your cold rolling process can differ just by based on the type of rolling load. So if you take, for example, if you take a Nippon roll, the 80% deformation in the Nippon rolling mill is not equivalent to 80% deformation in Kawasaki rolling mill. So you will have to optimize your entire process for that particular setup. It is not that there is one thumb rule that which will be applicable to everything. The only thing is that you will have to control the deformation and the recrystallization to achieve that particular components, texture components. So that will be dependent upon your type of roll, reduction per pass, okay, how much you are rolling, what is the hot roll texture. So all the factors are interlinked with each other. You have to optimize everything.
Right.
Right.
So is there any, what is the effect of roller material on workpiece material? Somebody has asked.
There is no effect. See, your roll material is always of a D2 kind of steel, right?
Right.
See, your roll is always much harder than the material which you want to roll. Roller material does not have an effect. Roll what deformation you are giving? What is the percentage deformation per pass you are giving? That is
That is more important. True.
Okay. Roll material is usually always harder than basically you can say your whatever material you are rolling. Roll material is always harder than that. Otherwise, you will not get that kind of surface finish, right?
True.
For the material analysis, texture is not related to spring back. Spring back is related to your elasticity. So usually during rolling, they will have the control for the, you can say, spring back effect. Okay.
So, but what is the material analysis? Any specific software there?
See, you can use MTEX. MTEX software is there for EBFD texture analysis and X-ray texture analysis. It is a freeware. You will have, it is a MTEX MATLAB toolbox.
Okay.
So you can use MTEX. And then there are commercial softwares, like for example, if you want to analyze, then there is a TSL OIM software, then Oxford is there. So, but these are commercial software. So this MTEX toolbox, if you have a MATLAB, then it will work. It is a freeware. And spring back, okay, spring back is basically dependent upon the elasticity of the material. And you will have controls in the during rolling for taking care of that spring back itself. Okay. And during forming also, this spring back effect is taken into care, right? So whenever you are forming, you will always have some spring back. So that is where you will have to do the simulations. How much spring back is there and how I have to design this particular die such that this spring back is also taken care of. Okay.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay. Okay, thanks for, okay, you have, I thought somebody's writing the question.
No, I was writing.
Okay. Right. Okay, sir, thank you very much for this wonderful session on the characterization and forming process. And participants, we should thank the speaker. And thank you very much, sir. Thank you very much. And I'll stop the session, sir.
Okay.
You can withdraw from the session. I will ask the participants at 2:30 we will be meeting, and 2:25 please log in for the next session.
Okay,
sir.
Gupta sir, then I'll log off. Okay.
Sure, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. Bye, sir.
Okay.
Bye. Okay, sir. Thank you, everyone. We'll meet at 2:25. Bye.